Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to look at how you can implement the abstract factory pattern in Java. The abstract factory pattern is a creational design pattern that provides an interface for creating families of related or dependent objects without specifying their concrete classes. The abstract factory pattern is also known as a factory of factories. If you haven't watched my other video on the factory pattern, then I advise you to do so. You can find a link in the description of this video. Now, if this definition doesn't make sense yet, I'm sure that the following class diagram will make it clearer, but if it doesn't, the code will definitely do that for you. Because at Campbell Tech, we are all about simplifying complexity. Now, let's have a look at the UML class diagram. So notice we have the abstract factory, which will normally be either an interface or an abstract class. It contains two methods, create product A and create product B, where create product A returns abstract product A and create product B returns abstract product B. Now, you'll notice that concrete factory 1, when the create product A method is invoked, it'll return product A1 or concrete product A1, and when the create product A method on concrete factory 2 is invoked, it'll return concrete product A2. Similarly, when create product B is invoked on concrete factory 1, it'll return concrete product B1, and when the create product B method on the concrete factory 2 is invoked, it'll return concrete product B2. Now you might say, hang on, you said it's going to make more sense when you show us the UML class diagram. And I know, looking at it from this angle, it seems quite confusing. But let me show you the UML diagram that is based on our use case that we are going to use when we code the abstract factory pattern. Now, we are going to base our use case on the localization or internationalization use case. Now, don't worry, we're not going to try and rewrite the default Java localization code. We're going to keep it simple and to ensure that you understand exactly how to implement the abstract factory pattern. So here you'll notice that our abstract factory is called international factory with two methods, create language and create capital city. That brings us to our abstract products. Our abstract product A is language, that's an interface, and then our abstract product B is capital city, with language having a single method greet and capital city having two methods that needs to be implemented, including get population and list top attractions. For our concrete product A, we have English implementing the language interface and Spanish as our concrete product A2 also implementing the language interface. Then concrete product B1 is London implementing the capital city interface and Madrid implementing the capital city interface also. And then we've got England factory for our concrete factory 1 and then Spain factory as our concrete factory 2. And then, as you have guessed, when we invoke the create language method on the England factory, it will return English. And when we invoke the create capital city method, it will return London. For the Spain factory, it will return Spanish as the language and Madrid as the capital city. But without any further ado, let's start with the code. I would suggest starting with the abstract product interfaces first. So let's go ahead and create a new interface and then let's call it language. Now, as mentioned, it'll only have a single method called greet. So we'll say void greet and it won't take in any arguments. And then let's go ahead and create our abstract product B, and that'll be another interface. And we'll call this interface capital city. Now, as mentioned, we'll have two methods. Firstly, a method that returns the population. So it'll return an integer and let's call it get population. And then another method that returns a list of top attractions. So this can return a list of string, and we can call this list top attractions. What I like to do is to add a comment to identify the different artifacts when implementing the abstract factory pattern. So the capital city will be the abstract product B. And our language interface will be abstract product A. Okay, next up, let's go ahead and create our abstract factory. This again will be an interface, and we'll call it International Factory. As mentioned, this will be the abstract factory, and it'll contain two methods. Firstly, one that returns language, and we'll call it create language. And then another that returns capital city, and we'll call it create capital. Okay, then let's go ahead and create our concrete classes. So first, let's start with the concrete implementations of the language interface. In other words, concrete product A and concrete product B. So the first class we'll call English, and it'll implement the language interface. Now we're going to keep it very simple to focus on the abstract factory implementation rather than some specific implementation, because complex implementations can often distract you from the actual pattern. So let's simply print out hello. And we'll say that's the English way of greeting somebody. And then let's go ahead and create our concrete product A2, and that will be Spanish. Also implementing the language interface. And again, let's keep it simple. We are simply going to print out hola. Again, let's go ahead and mark our artifacts. Spanish is the concrete product A2, and then English is the concrete product A1. Now for concrete product B1 and B2, go ahead and create another class, and this time call it London. London is our concrete product B1, and it implements the capital city interface. This time around, we have two methods that we need to implement. Firstly, get population, and let's say London has 8.9 million people. Then for the top attractions, let's return arrays.asList, and in there we can return Tower Bridge, Buckingham Palace, as well as Big Ben. Alright, so now we have implemented the London class, which is our concrete product B1. Next up, let's add concrete product B2. So go ahead and create another class, and let's call it Madrid. Now Madrid is obviously the capital of Spain, so let's implement the capital city interface. At the time of the recording, the estimated population for Madrid was 3.2 million people. So let's say 3.2. Then again, we're going to return arrays.asList. Then for the top attractions in Madrid, we'll say it's the Royal Palace. the Prado Museum, and the Retiro Park. Okay, so now we have implemented our concrete product B2. Let's also mark it as such. Concrete product B2. Okay, so next up is the concrete factories. So let's go ahead and create another class and call it England Factory. England Factory is going to implement our abstract factory, International Factory. And we can mark it as Concrete Factory 1. And then let's go ahead and implement both of the methods. And when the create language method is invoked on the England factory, we'll return English as the language. And when the create capital method is invoked, we'll return London. Okay, and then let's go ahead and create our concrete factory 2. This will be Spain factory. It'll also implement our abstract factory, which is International Factory. And then let's go ahead and implement our methods. When the create language method is invoked, we'll return Spanish. And when the create capital method is invoked, we'll return Madrid. Okay, so as you can see, it's quite simple to implement the concrete factories. Let's also mark this as concrete factory 2. Now we've got our abstract factory, the International Factory, that returns the abstract product A, which is the language interface, and the abstract product B, which is the capital city interface. The England factory returns English, which is the concrete product A1, and it returns London, which is the concrete product B1. Whereas the Spain factory returns Spanish as the concrete product A2 and Madrid as the concrete product B2. Now let's go ahead and implement our client code. So let's say International Factory, let's call it factory equals new England factory, and then we'll say language, call it language equals factory dot create language, and then let's say capital city, call it capital equals factory dot create capital. And then let's go ahead and invoke the greet method, and that'll print out the greeting in the specific language that the factory method resolves. Next, let's print out the population. So we can say total population, and then we'll invoke capital dot get population, and then let's print out the top attractions. And we'll invoke the list top attractions method. Okay, now let's run the main method, and you'll see that we get greeted in English, hello, total population 8.9 million, and then top attractions, Tower Bridge, Buckingham Palace, and Big Ben. Right, and that is because we used the England factory, so the total population of London is 8.9 million, and these are the top attractions in London. Now if we change this to Spain factory and run this again, we can see that we are greeted in Spanish, hola, with a total population of 3.2 million in Madrid, and the top attractions are Royal Palace, Prado Museum, and Retiro Park. Now, you might say, this is cool, but you don't like this explicit Spain factory that's happening here. And there is actually another approach to implementing this, and that's called the provider approach. So what we can do is to go ahead and create another class, and then let's call this class International Provider. And then we are going to implement two static methods for our provider class, say public static, and then the first one will return the language interface, say create language, and it'll take in an argument that we'll use. This will basically be a factory method, and as mentioned before, the abstract factory pattern is also known as the factory of factories. And when you look at this provider class, it makes sense because this in fact is a factory method. So let's go ahead and create an enum as our factory key, call it country, and then we'll have two values, England and Spain. All right, and then if we go back here, we'll say country, and then we'll create a switch that switches on the country argument. And then what we'll do here is say case, it's England. We'll return new English as the language. If it's Spain, we'll return new Spanish. And if it's another value that this factory method is not yet supporting, we'll say throw new illegal argument exception, and we can say something like invalid country, and just add the country enum there. When you're extending your application and adding, for example, other languages, you might remember to add it as an enum, but forget to add support for it here in the provider or this provider factory method. And then this error will actually show you, oops, you've forgotten to, for example, implement the German language. Okay, we'll have another static method. Let's say public static, and it'll return capital city. Let's call it create capital. It'll also take in the country enum, and then we'll say switch on country. I'm going to copy this, and let's just say return London and return Madrid for Spain, and then we'll say invalid country. Okay, so now what we need to do is to go ahead and update our client code if we want to use this provider approach. So first of all, we'll get rid of the international factory and we'll specify an enum. So we can say country equals country.england. And we'll change factory.createLanguage to international provider.createLanguage and pass in the country. And then factory.createCapital also to international provider.createCapital and pass in the country. And then we can go ahead and run this. And then it says, hello, total population 8.9 million. With the top attractions in London. Okay, to improve our output, let's add two more print lines. So let's say country, so that we know what country we are talking about. And then another print line for the capital. And we can say capital.getClass .get simple name. Okay, let's run this, And you'll see that it says the country is England, capital is London. They greet you in English in London. Hello. Total population is 8.9 million. And the top attractions are Tower Bridge, Buckingham Palace, and Big Ben. Now all we have to do is change the country enum to Spain. And if we run this, you'll see that it conveniently changes it to Spain, Madrid, Hola, being greeted in Spanish. Total population of Madrid 3.2 million. And Royal Palace, Prado Museum, and Retiro Park as the top attractions. Okay, so now you know how to implement the abstract factory pattern in Java using the classic factory implementation approach as well as the provider approach. Now personally, I like the provider approach because then the definition of the abstract factory being a factory of factories makes sense. And it allows us with that extra level of abstraction, especially when considering that this country value will generally come from a user via a user interface, a console, or potentially via an HTTP call to a REST API. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please like it and subscribe to our channel so that we can give you more videos like these.